Hey everyone, get ready for an out-of-this-world tale about college sweethearts whose love turned sour. Today on Our Space, it looks like the jig is up. Turns out the only thing worse than Dad's secrets was Mom's affair, and the son knew all along. He was rebelling because he was aware of his mum's cheating. I made sure she and her partner unknowingly exposed themselves. A bit of background on me. I'm a 37-year-old man, and for this story, let's call my wife Charity, who's also 37. We met in college when I was a freshman, still trying to figure out my path while she was driven and focused, already with a clear plan for her future. She aspired to be an academic, which I found really impressive. Most girls I dated before were just looking for fun, but Charity was different. From day one, she was all about the future, planning ahead and making things happen. That ambition drew me to her. I wasn't used to someone who had their life figured out so early, and I realized I needed that kind of positive influence if I wanted to take life seriously. She had this confidence that made it seem like she could handle anything, and she didn't just go with the flow. She actively made things happen. Before long, I found myself really into her, not just because of her ambition, but because she inspired me to be better. Our dating phase was quick and filled with that youthful passion I sometimes wish I still had. Things got intense fast, and everyone around us could see the potential for marriage if we didn't mess things up. My friends used to tease me about it, and I just laughed it off. Let me know if you'd like any changes. Back then, I hoped I wouldn't be the reason things got complicated. As a parent now, I reflect on my own mischievous past, which made me doubt myself. About a year into our relationship, Cherry found out she was pregnant. Definitely not in our plans, and we weren't ready at all. She didn't want to keep the baby, feeling it would derail her career, and I understood her big dreams. But I wasn't the kind to push for a termination, and neither were our families. Cherry respected her parents a lot, and I think they influenced her decision more than I could. So we decided to keep the baby, and that's how our first son came into our lives. Going through all of this was draining for me. I put my own ambitions on hold to help Cherry finish her degree. I didn't want her to look back and resent our child for it. I passed up some great opportunities and even a solid job offer out of state, but I believed in her and what we were building together. Since I didn't support terminating the pregnancy, I knew sacrifices were necessary. We didn't get married right away. Our son was born first. Cherry dreamed of a white wedding dress, and she wanted to have the perfect figure to go with it, so we waited. Eventually, we did tie the knot after the baby came. We were young and inexperienced, and like many couples, we made our share of mistakes. Cherry struggled with some resentment towards the baby, feeling it forced her into an earlier marriage than she had planned. I understood where she was coming from. She had her life all mapped out. Suddenly, we had a baby and a husband in the mix. But honestly, we learned quickly that things with the baby got easier over time, and we adjusted. Charity finished her degree, got her master's, and eventually became an assistant lecturer. I was so proud of her. I used to brag about her to my friends all the time. She was the best, no doubt. Later in our marriage, we had 2 more kids, and for a while, I thought we were rock solid. Charity worked hard and significantly increased our earning potential, building a decent life for us. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. She kind of became the backbone of the household, running things like a boss, managing the kids, and taking care of everything. All I really needed to focus on was providing and fulfilling my responsibilities as a husband. And honestly, I didn't mind. I got a bit laid back, letting her handle most decisions. At the time, it felt right, but looking back, I wonder if stepping back from those daily responsibilities contributed to what happened later. The thing is, I genuinely thought our relationship was fine. Nothing seemed off. We were just a middle-aged couple, married for over a decade. Sure, the fireworks were gone, but we felt more like old best friends, steady and calm. I'm not great at expressing myself, but that's how it felt. Ironically, it was my son's behavior that opened my eyes to what was really going on. He started acting out, and while I know teenagers can be strange, this was different. It wasn't just typical mood swings, he was outright disrespectful to his mom. This behavior was completely out of character for him. Yes, he and his mum have had a lot of friction, which I've tried to address, but I never got anywhere. If we dig deeper, I think she still holds some resentment. But she loves him too. I felt excluded. He avoided me completely. Not outright rude, but he wouldn't talk to me at all. With his younger siblings, he became a full-on bully, constantly angry, and I had no idea why. We tried everything to discipline him, grounding, taking away privileges, but nothing worked. I even considered using a belt like I was raised, but I knew that would make things worse. He was just so angry. He had everything he needed, and we weren't strict or overbearing, so his behavior really threw us for a loop. It got so bad that my wife suggested therapy, which made me realize I needed to take more drastic action to figure out what was going on. After talking to a few friends, I decided to take a day off work to sit down and have a serious conversation with him. I even called his school to say he was sick, just so we could have the day to ourselves. Later that day, I went to his room to talk. You know how it is with teenagers? It took a lot of back and forth, but then he blurted out something I never expected. He said his mom was cheating on me. At first, I laughed it off. I had known her longer than he'd been alive, and it felt like he hated her for some reason, using this accusation as a way to lash out. She was always either working or managing things at home. When would she even have time to cheat? I couldn't believe what my son was saying. He looked completely serious, and I realized I needed to pay attention. Despite his occasional rudeness, I never thought of him as a liar. In fact, he often told the truth a bit too openly. But now, he was in tears, telling me he'd seen his mother with one of his teachers. They weren't just casually interacting. It felt intimate to him. I kept asking if he was sure, if he could have been mistaken, but he was adamant. He claimed he had seen them together multiple times, both in her car and outside of school. Suddenly, everything clicked. His recent anger and odd behavior made sense. He shared his feelings of being treated differently from his siblings and how he felt his mother never really wanted him. All this resentment was boiling over, and he was furious with me for not noticing the signs. I was shaken, but knew I couldn't jump to conclusions. His accusation could change our family forever. Still, I couldn't just dismiss what he was saying. So I reluctantly encouraged him to gather more information. It wasn't my finest moment, but I felt I needed to uncover the truth. Maybe I was too focused on the chaos around me to see what was right in front of me. I felt too much of a coward to do it myself. I had hoped that by having him investigate, he could prove himself wrong and let go of his anger, realizing she truly loved him. My plan was simple: check her texts and call records. Since she wasn't very tech-savvy, I doubted she'd deleted any evidence. However, it would look suspicious if I snooped around on her phone, so I had my son do it. He was already acting mad at me and rude to her, so he figured she wouldn't suspect anything. All he had to do was take screenshots and send them my way. Then my son suggested using spyware to track her phone. I had no idea how that worked, so I let him handle it. While he dug into that, I started paying more attention to Charity. Strangely, she wasn't coming home late or acting shady. No weird excuses, no sudden work trips. Just more meetings at work, even on weekends, and she was often at her office preparing for lectures. She didn't seem distant or defensive like in those cheating stories we read. Every time I asked about her schedule, she had a reasonable explanation. Just when I was about to tell Jason to stop the investigation, I'm glad I didn't. He sent me the messages, and everything I needed to know was right there. How they met or developed feelings for each other remains a mystery, but the proof was undeniable. I'm struggling with how to process what I've discovered. I overheard conversations about sneaking around during work hours, and it's clear they have feelings for each other. I haven't confronted her yet. I just sat with the knowledge. What pushed me to write this is when she mentioned leaving me, but he didn't want that. He's enjoying the thrill of keeping things casual and isn't interested in a future with her. Now my son has taken it further. He's brought me pictures and videos of them meeting up. Apparently, they have a regular spot for their rendezvous. It's undeniable at this point, but I still haven't confronted her. I'm furious and want solid proof, maybe catching them in the act, before I take any action. I have to consider the kids, and it's hard to accept that her son has witnessed this side of her. People often say divorced parents shouldn't turn their kids against one another, but I'm relieved I don't have to worry about that. Now I regret giving my son a hard time about his attitude. I've been criticized for putting him in this position, and I know I messed up. I was so blindsided by the possibility that I didn't want to face the truth myself, so I made the cowardly choice to let him handle it. If I had the chance to do it all over again, I would approach it differently. I have to say, with a name like that, you'd think she would be more responsible instead of giving it away to her child's teacher during office hours. Anyway, your son's behavior was definitely a sign that something deeper was happening. While using him to gather evidence might not have been the best approach, it's clear you were trying to understand the situation without making any hasty decisions. Maybe it wasn't your finest parenting moment, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Update: thanks to all your comments and advice, I decided not to confront her directly and instead went straight to a lawyer. I gathered everything: messages, timestamps, screenshots, and sent it all to the lawyer. It turns out her work commitments were actually meetups with the teacher. The worst part is, she involved our kids in her deception, telling them she had important work to attend to while sneaking off to see Chris, even when they needed her time. My lawyer was fantastic. He started working on the divorce papers right away and confirmed that the evidence I had collected was substantial. Between the last time I wrote and now, I had my son install an app to monitor her messages on my phone and delete it from his. Thankfully, I did that, as they had escalated to sending inappropriate images to each other. The most frustrating part is that on the days they exchanged those messages, she would return and be unable to keep her hands off me. I knew it wasn't me she was interested in, so I always made up an excuse. My lawyer also mentioned that if I could prove she was not only being unfaithful, but also neglecting the kids in the process, especially as it stemmed from her affair, it would strengthen my case significantly. I'm looking to build a stronger case for custody. My lawyer suggested that involving the kids in my life would significantly strengthen my position, especially since we both have similar incomes, which might eliminate the need for alimony. She also advised me to document any financial transactions related to my wife's affair, particularly evidence from her text messages, as this could impact asset division. Any financial support Chris received from her could work in my favor, especially given the gifts he got from her. The divorce papers are already prepared, and I plan to pick them up later this week. However, I discovered that she was scheduled to meet Chris for lunch. She claimed it was to help some master's students with their research, which I found infuriating, especially since just a few days earlier we had celebrated our youngest child's birthday with her family around. When I suggested she join us for lunch, hoping to change her plans, she refused, even with the kids pleading with her. At that moment, I decided I wouldn't hold back anymore. I told my kids and relatives that we would go out to lunch without her. Ironically, I planned to take them to the very restaurant where she was meeting Chris, far outside our town, where she likely thought I wouldn't find out. I wanted her to experience the humiliation she had put me through, and I wasn't going to do it alone. I know some may disapprove of my approach, but I felt I needed to take a stand. I wanted my children to see who their mother really was. They were old enough to understand. I hoped they would realize that the divorce wasn't my fault. That afternoon, we arrived at the restaurant and sat at a table where we could see the entrance. A few minutes later, while we were eating, she walked in arm with Chris, clearly all over each other. I felt a surge of anger but managed to keep it together, wanting her to confront the situation. My youngest daughter spotted her first and instinctively called out, "Mom's here!" Before she grasped the reality of the situation, Charity looked up, saw us, and froze. I gave her a small smile and let the silence speak for itself. She approached us, stumbling through a weak excuse, but it was clear the damage was done. Our kids were there, along with her sister and mother. I didn't need to say a word. I simply shook my head and walked out with the kids, two of whom were very confused. I left her to face the consequences, and the look on her face was something to remember, though it didn't change anything. Her mother and sister stayed back to talk to her, but eventually joined us in the car, clearly at a loss for words. When we got home, Charity tried to apologize, but it was far too late. Everyone was upset with her. The next day, I handed her the divorce papers. She was shocked, and I think it finally hit her how serious the situation was and what was at stake. My lawyer ensured the terms were solid, she didn't receive a dime, and I pursued full custody of the kids. I didn't win that fight completely, but I was determined. I believed her infidelity didn't completely discredit her as a parent, but it certainly worked in my favor with the 70-30 custody arrangement. The upside was that she didn't put up much of a fight. Her sister, in particular, pressured her because of what she had done. She had faced her own struggles with relationships, and seeing her sister ruin a good thing probably reminded her of all the bad partners she had dealt with. I heard from friends that she's been pretty miserable lately, which seemed like an attempt to elicit my pity or forgiveness. But I'm way past that now. The school district didn't want the negative publicity from a teacher involved with a married parent, so they let Chris go immediately, which felt satisfying. The kids are still processing everything. They haven't said much, and I can't blame them. I hate that it came to this, but I truly believe a divorce is better than raising kids in an unhappy environment. It impacts them one way or another. Now that it's over, I just hope we can all move on and that my children will be okay. I want to believe I made the right decision. What's done is done, and I'm ready to embrace the next chapter of my life. That moment at the restaurant must have been intense, seeing her walk in with Chris and realizing what she had lost. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. It's understandable to want the kids to see the truth, even if it's hard for them. I'm glad to hear your lawyer has been thorough and that you ended up with 70-30 custody without financial losses. You did what you had to do. It's evident that your priority is your kids' well-being. Given the delicate situation, you're absolutely right. Sometimes a divorce is healthier than raising them in an environment filled with tension and unhappiness. It will take time for everyone to adjust, but it seems you're ready for the next chapter in your life, and that's what truly matters. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today on Our Space. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. See you next time.